All right, so no technology is a panacea for most of the world's problems. But what technology often does is show us where status quo in the world is falling short. And in order to address the big question that this panel will try to wrestle over the course of 30 or so minutes, is can Web3 and decentralization and distributed systems help fix the internet? All of us have experienced the critical flaw and the single points of failure that are baked into the internet's fiber. But the panel we've assembled today are leaders, technologists, developers, operators who have started to weave an alternative that actually works. And so with that, I'd like you to introduce yourselves coming from this way to the other, because so many of you wear so many hats and you often run around just with like names that will soon be reduced just to symbols. Let's start with you, Marta. Just maybe say hello, who you are, what you do, and explain the Filecoin Foundation briefly as well.
Sure. I'll be very brief. I'm Marta Belcher. I'm the president and chair of the Filecoin Foundation, which is the governance body for the Filecoin network, which I am sure I will tell you about in the course of this panel.
Awesome. And then the person to the left of Marta is in no small measure one of the reasons the fourth industrial revolution discussion has been brought to Davos so permanently, but all of the other emerging technologies, including blockchain, went from the fringe to the core. Sheila.
I'm Sheila Warren. So I am now the Chief Executive Officer of the Project Liberty Institute and the Chief Strategy and Operations Officer here at Project Liberty, which needs no introduction. Thank you all for joining us in this space here at Future House to talk about all of these pressing issues of our time. And yes, I actually was the founder of the blockchain team at the World Economic Forum. So all those years when you couldn't walk up and down, go a foot without running into crypto something or the other were the years I was in office here. So what a way we've come. What a
Yes,
long way
indeed.
we've come.
And speaking of coming a long way, Duff Gordon, from a small firm, what's going on in your stealth mode company?
Well, I was going to say, first of all, I'm not Faria Shirzad. So I just want to make that clear. Who's amazing, who's my boss? He couldn't be here, so apologies for that. Instead, I'm Duff Gordon. I look after international policy at a small firm you might have heard of, Coinbase. I've been here for nearly 3 years, and previously was 15 years in traditional finance. And I'm halfway through the book, so hopefully that gives me a bit of a grounding for this panel, and looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that, let me try to dive into then this big question that we've asked in the description of this panel, which is, can Web3 and these technologies of distribution and decentralization fix the internet? But before we start to fix it, I would love maybe, Sheila, if I could ask you first, what's wrong with it? It works just fine. When people were quitting TikTok, they migrated to Red Note. So what's the problem?
What's the problem?
What's the problem?
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time in our society talking about financial exclusion and inclusion, and who's in and out of banking systems, and who has access to capital and who doesn't. There's also a tremendous divide, not even digital divide, not even the ability to access the internet, but the internet itself. Who is it serving? Who is it working for? And the reality is that monopolistic actors that work on the internet have actually created capture models that capture our attention, monetize our attention, monetize our data, and it isn't healthy for us, and I define healthy in many different ways, much of which you've heard about over the course of the talks we've had here today. So it's not so much that the internet is broken, it's that the foundational architecture of the internet, the base of these business models in particular, it doesn't serve humanity, and it's not pro-social in ways that a decentralized internet could actually be. And we've seen in multiple different kinds of experiments that it actually is.
And Marta, if I could come to you, we've been at this for a long time. And in some ways, the tech may very well be the easy part. And where change falls short is because of governance issues, entrenchment issues, people issues. And so if the tech is easy, first challenge me on that one. Would you agree with that? Because oftentimes people's experience of blockchain is, as a technology stack, it is hard to understand, it's jargon ridden. But is the tech the easy part? Would that be a correct assumption? And then the second point is all the human stuff and the organizational stuff the real problem?
Yeah, so I think that the thing that is hard is, we sort of had this original internet, and the original vision of the internet was very much, empowering individuals, and really actually a decentralized vision for the internet. But I think the thing that makes it hard is sort of, the economics and the realities over time have pushed us to a place where we really end up living our lives through just a handful of corporations. And so, to use an example from sort of my corner of Web3, when you go to a website, if you click on, a Facebook page, whatever, that data is being stored somewhere in the world, right? You're getting it from somewhere. And it's almost certainly being stored by one of three companies, Amazon, Microsoft, or Google. And so, you really have no choice but to trust those three companies with your data, and to trust that they will keep it safe from hackers and they won't misuse it or abuse it to, abuse your attention, that they'll keep it safe from government actors and unreasonable requests. And so we really envision a future of the internet that is fundamentally different, where instead of having all of the data of the world stored by only three companies, you can actually have individuals be in control of their own data. And that is sort of the foundation for why we created Filecoin is, it's really hard from an economics perspective to create to create storage at scale, right? That's why there's only a few companies that do it. And so what we saw is a way to actually use this new technology, cryptocurrency in particular, to actually create this new incentive system. And so for us, what we created was you can think of it like Airbnb for file storage. And basically how it works is people will rent out storage space on their computer hardware, and other people will be able to store their files kind of chopped up and encrypted on other people's computers. And that really enables you to suddenly have this alternative. So you don't, you don't have to have just one giant conglomerate. We can all together put together our computer hardware into almost like a supercomputer network where all these individuals are contributing, and the result is something that is at the scale of these big tech companies.
That's great. Well, and speaking of scale, I feel like this is a really good segue, Tom. Thank you. Because arguably Coinbase as a firm has defied the last decade of the ups and downs in the tech, the regulatory uncertainty, the market uncertainty, and has produced a durable, in many respects, category-defining company. What lessons can be drawn in not only the growth cycle of a company like Coinbase, but also how do you stay true, given the pressures of being a company that is in the public markets, to the technology promise, which is about democratization? And do we have to make trade-offs there too?
Yeah, let's spare the elephant in the room. So I represent a centralized exchange, and we're talking about decentralization here. So I'm kind of glad that
I tried to give you a way out of that, by the way.
So thanks, Dante. Always, this is why he's the best moderator. But look, we, like Brian, a lot of you know Brian Armstrong, who I work for, like his vision has always been like a very true vision about economic freedom, about decentralization, about user empowerment. And we're on a kind of a journey, and a lot of the things that we're very excited about at Coinbase right now are actually providing people with things like self-custodial wallets, right? Allowing people to kind of have self-sovereign kind of custody of their assets. We just spun up a layer 2 blockchain on Ethereum called Base, and we're attracting a ton of Web3 projects to that. And we'll talk about some of those later, maybe kind of decentralized social media and some of these alternatives in the Web3 space to the analogs in kind of Web2 that I think you were kind of talking about. So we're very excited about that, and we are going to decentralize and disrupt ourselves. That's the kind of company. So I think, the answer to your question about how do you stay true to everything is that I think you can't get complacent. You can't stand still. You've got to keep disrupting. And I think for us, the future is decentralization. We see, DEXs, we see self-custody, and that is something that Coinbase wants to support, and we're actively kind of really investing here. But if I step back, like my day job is kind of going around the world talking to regulators and politicians, and the conversation on blockchain, normally you get funneled into like the finance ministry, and it's all this kind of financial services and its payments, and and that's a hard conversation in and of itself. But I always try and say, hey, I'd love to meet your colleague just across the way who is kind of thinking about, innovation and technology and other things, because blockchains are a kind of horizontal enabling technology. It's not just we're going to transform payments, we're going to transform kind of capital markets and all of those things. But, what we're talking about here today is how do we transform the internet? And, I paint this picture, and Dante, maybe you can answer this as well if that's allowed. But it's
you don't get to ask the questions.
But But I think this project is doing great work because getting traction on that second topic, like you have enough difficulty with, oh, payments seem like they work well. You get this funky app
Yeah.
and people feel like it's great. The plumbing's terrible, and we're telling them to fix the plumbing, and US, Circle are doing a great job on that. But it's getting people to buy, getting politicians and regulators to buy into this vision of a decentralized internet where you own and control your data, and we can move away from this kind of oligopoly of kind of platforms that are monetizing all of our data and give people the power to kind of monetize their internet experience is such a powerful vision. But right now I think we lack really tangible good use cases to point to and talk to, and Filecoin I think is a superb one.
Exactly.
But if we could replicate you across different kind of places and things, it would make Sheila's job, my job, Dante's job a bit easier as we transition into that really interesting conversation around the internet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the sticky original sins, if you will, of this entire industry is Bitcoin, which was designed for a very specific purpose. It was designed, and the initial instantiation of it was meant to be a new accounting ledger. It was meant to be potentially a replacement of currency that was meant to be financial in nature. And so the expectation is that every single thing that is crypto adjacent is somehow about financial services, which is not true, right? And because of that, we were kind of shoved as an industry into the financial regulatory boxes, which are quite narrow and quite restrictive, certainly suited in some ways for payments and other things like investments, capital markets, things like this, financial stability, very important topics. But this is a technology. Financial services is but one application or one kind of use of the technology, and there are many, many others, among which my personal favorite is decentralized file storage. But so what we're doing at Project Liberty is having that base conversation and trying to recast some of this to say Bitcoin is Bitcoin. Meme coins are meme coins. We'll just touch that and maybe move on. Let's do that. Stable coins are stable coins, right? But there are other utility tokens or other tokens that do other things that are technically, because we lack goods, we lack a good semantic framework of semiotics here, that are technically crypto tokens, but that have a very different casting. And nobody would, in their logical mind, say, oh, well, we have to think about those as potentially payment mechanisms, because that's not the point of the exercise. But having that conversation and recasting some of this again in its broadest sense is, I think, a moment that we are fortunately in where we can do that, and that's part of what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, so I thank you, by the way, and really great round in sort of addressing the problem statement at one level, and also just the tensions in the policy and the other conversations that come with it. And then one of the real issues, right, is for this to really work at scale, let's assume the technology is the easy part. Thank you, Marta. How do we then get sort of the user adoption to follow suit? Because if the 100 million, 200 million, billion digital wallet owners are using this for speculation and poker chips and crypto casinos, will the non-financial use cases ever take hold at the type of scale they need to take hold in order to start to decouple people, humanity, and our privacy and our rights from the internet of old? And so I'd be curious to turn over to you and then other reactions to that.
Yeah, in some ways, crypto is not very new. It's been around. You've all seen it on the promenade for a long time. But I have to say, when it comes to use cases that are not financial, I actually feel that we've really only scratched the surface. And the reason that cryptocurrency in particular is so powerful is what it does is it allows you to program your money, right? So you can write a computer program that says, for every second of a song that I'm playing on my computer, automatically transfer a millionth of a cent to the songwriter, and automatically transfer a millionth of a cent to the singer for every second. And that can happen instantly, automatically, across the entire world, in a way that's just as easy as sort of attaching a file to an email, right? Like in many ways, cryptocurrency sort of does for value what the internet did for information. And so that ability to program your money, I think, is actually incredibly, incredibly powerful, and has all these use cases that are not fundamentally financial. So you can have things that are, they're called sort of decentralized physical infrastructure, of which Filecoin is one. You can have decentralized file storage. You can also have networking, where you really are able to suddenly create these networks where you can kind of combine the power of many different people into one place. Another place you'll see this, for example, where I think it will become quite important is in AI, because when all the problems I just talked about when it comes to decentralized storage and the internet are just as big of a problem when you start thinking about AI and like how many companies are going to be able to actually afford the compute, right? You know, to have that kind of computational power, you need to have the ability to do that in a decentralized way as well. So I think we're just scratching the surface when it comes to that.
To take the pressure off the crypto people, my next op-ed is titled "Why AI Must Die." So it's a joke. So Sheila, just to articulate the solutions, because the Project Liberty team, you have ridiculous leverage, you have momentum. There's a credible bid out there. I even spoke about it on the news, BBC, not long ago. So talk to us a little bit about the solution set. Wave 1 was the problem. What's the solution?
Yeah, so I think the solution is actually recasting tokens and what they can be used for. And so Marta laid the foundation so well. The idea that you can actually have a token that carries, it takes a unit from place to place. Okay, so if you think about the transfer exchange of value, that is not just financial or monetary in nature. So, you know, for example, a Bitcoin, you can track a Bitcoin on the Bitcoin blockchain from place to place to place to place, right? You could track a unit of information similarly. So when you imagine the royalty type payments that Marta was describing, when you imagine moving from black box to glass box AI, well, how do you prove the inputs? You can do that on chain because you can actually really identify which inputs went into the learning model and created the algorithm. You can also, importantly, prove what inputs were not included, right? So we talk about algorithmic bias. How do you prove? How do you prove that there is not bias, there's reduced bias, or bias was addressed in a set, or whatever it is? On-chain data and data tracking can help do that, and that the mechanism of that tracking is a token. So what Project Liberty is looking at with frequency, with other things that we're working on, is thinking through that layer, that base layer of the technology, thinking about that movement of value from place to place, and how you are able to basically shine a spotlight on all of that in ways that could be financial, might not be financial, but are about recasting this, the internet, so that it creates economic modeling that benefits everybody. Now, I'll give another example of that just really quickly. So right now, you know, we all know, whether intuitively or cognitively or, you know, viscerally, I mean, in every way you can possibly know, we know that we are there's digital serfdom happening, right? Like our attention, our clicks, our constant scrolling, all of that, it's not even just the advertising, the stickiness of our eyeballs in various places, all of that is being tracked, and that's being used in some cases by third parties, in some cases by companies to train, you know, LLMs, whatever it is, being used in ways that we don't have any visibility into or awareness of, but we also have no monetary gain from any of that activity, right? If there were ways of giving us more empowerment and agency over the data that we generate and create collectively that feeds into all of this, you can see less of an extractive, exploitative model and these business models emerging that are actually more distributive, okay? Now, the incumbency is not going to support some of this because advertising and these models, the ones that are extractive, have benefited and are highly lucrative for a very small handful of players, right? So the overall pie might shrink a bit, but the distributive effect of all of that could be the tide that rises in everybody. So I think the models here are just as important, that's what we work on at the Institute, as the technology itself, which, as I think to the points we've already made, is pretty much ready to go.
All right, and Tom, thoughts on both waves? And then the other question I want to ask you is sort of opine a little bit on regulation and policy, if you don't mind. I mean, like bring it home for us on, is this just the unregulated Wild West of internet banking? And to the extent it's just financial, you know, what are we learning from your world tours?
That's exactly where I was going to pick up, because I agree with everything that's been said. I think the difficulty and the challenge, sorry to raise the challenge, is the non-consumptive use of some of these tokens that can have a financial application as well. And so there will be dual use tokens. So if I want to send a piece of artwork or something and I want to use the base network or the Ethereum network, I'm going to have to pay a gas fee, and that gas fee is ETH. And, you know, right now when you speak to a financial regulator, they're like, oh, ETH, Ethereum, okay, so it's speculation, there's consumer protection, there's all sorts of things that we've got to worry about, you know, financial stability. So what we've got to do is we've got to figure out and work collaboratively with regulators and say, hey, we're going to move into a world, this tokenized world, where people are going to use their kind of wallet as a browser to kind of Web3. And all of the interactions that Sheila was talking about are going to be kind of recorded and monetized through NFTs and things that will sit in your wallet, and you'll be able to deploy your own data. That's great. Within the same wallet or an adjacent wallet, you're going to have a bunch of things that actually you've bought because it's a hedge against inflation, or it's an investment, or you're shorting something and you might have bought some Solana because you like the meme coin stuff that's happening or whatever. And I think that's something that I'm not sure I have a quick and easy answer to right now, but I do think for the vision here, which is such a potent one to really take off, I feel like we've got to help regulators identify where do we have to protect consumers from using these things, because there's some form of kind of investment thesis and that type of thing. But equally, we want to really encourage a kind of user-centric internet, which is going to be token-based. And so we're going to have different flavors of utility tokens, but some dual-use tokens. So I don't know whether Sheila's got views on this or others, but this feels to me like something that we've got to grapple with and figure out as we really try and kind of scale these projects.
Yeah,
Well,
I totally agree. Yeah.
speaking of dual-use tokens and moving from attention span to intention span, I've got to turn to this great audience and see if there's any audience questions that are burning. And true to form,
Karam, of course.
the smartly dressed gentleman in the front row.
From Bermuda.
I love it, yes.
Yeah, Karem here from Bermuda, but I do want to ask a very interesting question, and I don't know if you've discussed it. I was a little late, but after the whole Trump meme coin thing, is there a normalization of memes and meme coins going into government and politicians, whether it's for fundraising purposes or likeness or any sort of like future governance elements? Like, is this legitimate, or is this like a complete joke that we got to let, time pass and never go back to?
Give me my mic back. And by the way, do not advise the Premier of Bermuda to launch one. No, but so there's a thread of seriousness in that, which are so many of the things that historically with crypto been framed as gimmicky. An ICO bubble came and went. An NFT bubble came and went. Is this the next thing? Will it come and go? And do they then, in some respects, stigmatize the work of real progress, like uploading dollars on the internet or storage or changing the architecture at the foundational level? Any reactions?
I mean, it's just not what I find interesting, right? Like fundamentally, and I think this has always been an issue for me in crypto, which is like, I'm constantly asked, like, for example, by the press or whatever, about like the market and the price and I'm always like, well, the price can go up or down. This is not an interesting question. Like, there's two ways that could go. And I think that fundamentally this like idea of speculation, price, the market, like that is the least interesting thing about cryptocurrency. Like the thing that is interesting about cryptocurrency, at least to me, is the stuff that you can do with it that is like upgrading the web, right? Like ensuring the future of AI is decentralized, right? So it's just, to me, not interesting.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think all of us are on this. If you're really a believer in this technology, the most boring question you can be asked is, what's your market price prediction for 2025? It's like, I don't know, look at the index. It's out there for everybody to make their own decisions about that and assumptions about it, As far as meme coins go, I think, I think regulation is always about, well, when it's done correctly, okay, it's always a balance between encouraging innovation and protecting consumers, okay? That was a big caveat, I know. And you can always overcorrect to one or the other, for sure. You can be so protective of consumers that you're like, all of this is just way too crazy, even the stuff that's proven sticky over a long period of time. That's an overcorrection. You can also say, we must innovate at all costs, eggs to break an omelet, not our problem, consumer buyer beware, whatever. Also an overcorrection. The trick is finding that pivot point, okay? And in the United States, at the federal level, we certainly have not found that pivot point, and it remains to be seen how things shape up with this new situation that we're in and where that balance winds up coming in. I think the role of the private sector now, with the collaboration that seems to be emerging between the industry and the government in the United States at the federal level, and I say federal on purpose because states have been doing a lot of really strong engagement for quite a long time, so I say that on purpose. We'll see how it plays out. It's really too soon to tell at this precise moment, and I suspect that not unlike the price of Bitcoin historically, there will be some volatility in how collaborative those relationships are, right, at any given moment in time.
Well, maybe at the risk of being slightly contrarian, I will try and give a kind of defense of meme coins. Because look, my view, and obviously at Coinbase we list all sorts of different tokens, and look, my perspective on this is that these are legitimate, and we shouldn't think of crypto as being some kind of monolith, right? It's either digital gold or it's utility token. I think there's space for a whole bunch of things, and we live, in a free world, and if people want to put out meme coins, then our view is a meme coin is kind of an expression of culture and of affiliation and energy and creativity and zeitgeist. And if people want to buy a badge and they put it on their jacket, that's great, and they kind of buy it, and it gives them kind of affiliation and a club. We need smart regulation to make sure people know what they're buying. Exactly. I think that's the key kind of caveat here. That's how you differentiate. But we should also, and I think, it was alluded to in the question, or you said it, Dante, but like when the internet was invented, kind of no one knew what it was for, and we had kind of videos of cats, and we had kind of weird stuff happening. I just think that we're very early, okay? They're very early, and these meme coins are onboarding tons of new people into crypto. It's a bit of a stress test for some of the rails that they're running on. And so look, it's easy to say, hey, it's a waste of time, it's unethical. I'm not going to comment on any one particular coin. But in general, we think that there's a space, as long as the regulation is sound, we think that there's a space in the ecosystem for people who want to kind of capture the cultural zeitgeist. And we believe in a world where people can buy and do what they want. It's economic freedom, right? It's personal freedom. And so, we're certainly, in favor.
Yeah, so Sheila, I just wanted to really acknowledge Project Liberty for the work that you're doing to really help our children. And so I'm new to this world, and I've seen the good it can do, like contribute to Ukraine at a moment of need within days. But we also know about crypto, human trafficking, exploitation of children. So how does that work? How do you have an organization that protects and wants to help children, and at the same time have a conversation around crypto when that connects children with exploiters? So I'm trying to figure out how that exists in the same ecosystem.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd start by saying, I think that technology is a weapon or a tool depending on how it's deployed, right? And I don't mean that to be a pat answer. It's true, right? And so there's a sword and a shield element to any technology. And so to your point, I mean, I think it's easy to forget that the gap in funding that was provided to Ukraine is a great example. It's one I actually used when I testified in front of the Senate. That was the time that was needed for the international community to get together, to be able to get funds together to send over to be supportive, right? So the overall numbers in terms of crypto versus foreign aid were minuscule, relatively speaking, but it was the time, and it was the speed with which that aid arrived. There was no way that could have happened without crypto rails. Period. Full stop. Period. That's it, right? And that made all the difference. And that's been acknowledged by the Ukrainian military and other folks there. So that is a very real thing. On the other side, there are uses of cryptocurrency like cash, like frankly foreign philanthropic aid, right, that are illicit in nature, and some of which are quite terrible. That is also true. We live in a world in which all of those things are true at the same time.
Yeah, could I add to that? I think a couple things on that, and I think it's a really important question and something we have to grapple with. I think the first thing I would say is, in many ways, cryptocurrency is an absolutely terrible technology to use to commit crimes, because every single thing is being recorded on a public thing that everyone in the world can see, right? It's not just like some bank executives. Anyone in the world can see this ledger, which is why when you see things like, for example, the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, they got their Bitcoin back within 24 hours, because it's a terrible technology to use to commit crimes. Yeah, like, who actually loves cryptocurrency is
the FBI.
Like, yes, the FBI, exactly, because they can literally see, so it's first of all, it's a terrible technology to commit crimes, but I do think and I think that's sort of like a myth about cryptocurrency. You see it and you think, oh, this is really scary, and people perpetuate this myth, but I just don't think it's true. And the second thing I would say is, Sheila mentioned cash. I don't think we should look at a technology and say, oh, that technology is being used in some way to commit a crime, therefore that technology is bad and we should ban it. Like, we don't say, like, oh, there's these cars and they're being used as a getaway vehicle, so let's ban cars, right? Because then we'll prevent bank robberies, right? And similarly, like, whatever, the internet is used to commit crimes, and telephones, and U.S. dollars, right? And so I think it's a really important point to address, because it really is a myth that I think is holding this whole space back.
Yeah, I mean, the FBI actually, has said, like, if you want a crime, you're better off using paper bills than really anything else. The OG, method of paying for illicit activity is to transfer cash from a person to a person, because it's completely untraceable, meaningfully untraceable. So I think that's exactly right. And so you can't, right? Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, just to double click on that, and I think we have to be humble. It's a good question, right? And so there are good things and there are bad things, and we have to work at that. But, when I'm talking to policymakers, there's sometimes a sense that in crypto we don't do kind of KYC or AML.
Right.
And so then I have to remind them that, first of all, we do know your customer checks, right? Are you on a sanctions list, this type of thing, right, for our custodial products to the same degree as banks do. So that's like a level playing field. But then we can do something else, right, which Marta was talking about, which is know your transaction.
That's right.
Because we know who these wallets are, and if we think something is suspect, we don't just see like a bank. A bank just sees its own ledger, and then the next bank where the money goes to, right? So they just kind of see where it came from or where it went to and their own ledger. So that's like one hop. The transformation in analytics here is that it's a transparent network, so you see multiple hops away. And actually, we're now being asked by regulators that if we see a suspicious transaction, banks can only report suspicious transactions that happen on their ledger, right? We're now being told, can you report something 7 hops away? And that 7th hop might happen in a year's time, or it could have happened, whatever.
Yeah.
And so the sophistication of the analytics that you can put, so yes, these wallets are pseudonymous, but the sophistication of the analytics and then the offboarding means that this is a tool that the FBI, but also law enforcement around the world absolutely love, because it gives them so much more visibility in terms of what's going on. So I don't want to come off too defensive like this panel, because I think we have to be humble that there's stuff going on.
Yeah.
But I also think we've got to start telling this story that, like, we do AML, we do KYC, we also do KYT, and these things are really powerful and exciting.
Yeah, and to your specific question, very specific question about trafficking, there's actually a story that was in Wired, I think. It was a friend of ours, Johnny Levin, who runs Chainalysis, and he actually worked with law enforcement and is the reason that this horrific child trafficking ring out of Korea was taken down. And it's really well documented in this article just how that all went down. So to that specific question, actually, it's quite the reverse. Yeah.
And so we're nearly there. If not, we're going to get yanked off the stage. But I couldn't help but respond as well to the comment about Ukraine. It's, number one, you wouldn't stigmatize all banks for the failure of a single bank. But yet when there is a problem in crypto, it's usually individual products, blockchains, or other actors that create the problem. And often they have product names. And we would do ourselves a real good service by calling the bad actors, whether they're in the traditional financial system, whether they're in crypto or in technology, what they are, who they are, and using their names. Because every single time there's a Wall Street Journal headline that says crypto equals ransomware, then guess what happens? The next time there's a humanitarian opportunity to send a named crypto product, USDC, with named blockchains, in this case with Ukraine, Stellar, with named partners and others that all have names, the good actors can conspire to turn any technology into a technology that can make an extraordinary difference. And what this panel was all about, and what this extraordinary group of leaders are all about, is exactly showing the world the art of the possible. So I hope you each succeed in your endeavors, and I hope I've succeeded in my small task as a moderator. Thank you for your time, talent, and attention. Cheers.
Thank you. Thanks, Dante.